Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Martin Carette. I am financial counselor here at SISIP, and welcome to today's presentation, our financial basic workshop. First part of 3. So this first one will be concentrating on budgeting and saving techniques. First, a little bit about myself. So I've only been with SISIP for 9 months now. Very much enjoying it. I have, prior to that, worked for a nonprofit organization as a financial counselor there, and spent the previous about 17 years to that in the banking industry, primarily in the credit world. So again, that's where a lot of my background and understanding of credit comes from. I am a full-time virtual counselor here with SISIP. So I am here for anyone that needs any assistance through our various programs. I am available through telephone, through Teams, or any of those options are available. So if anything comes up, any questions or anything, we are definitely accessible to all of you. So we'll go ahead and start jumping. There's a lot of information to go through as far as the presentation goes. So things we're going to talk about today, we're going to learn about how to manage your spending, working with a budget, and how to properly work with a budget. And we're also going to talk about different tips and tricks on how to save money. So some of the benefits of this series of presentations is about taking control of your personal finance, which then helps you achieve for your life goals, helps provide for yourself, your family, just being a smarter consumer, and reduce stress. Financial stress is a big one for a lot of people. Sleepless night is just one bit. It can create problems in relationships and such. So it's very important to look at our personal finance because it does affect a lot of things. First, we'll start with a few quiz questions for everyone, just to give you an idea of the general situation of people here in Canada with their finance. So if we look at current average percentage of their income that Canadians save. So if people want to use the chat just to give answers, A, B, or C on what you think on average, what Canadians save. So I'll go ahead and just wait for a few answers. I got a few different ones here. All right, most people are going A for 5%. You are absolutely correct. Currently, on average, most Canadians save about 5%. Most financial books would tell you you should save 20% of your income. In today's world, not necessarily as realistic with the cost of living. So 10% would be a good goal right now as far as trying to save when we're looking at savings. If you can do 10% of your income, you're above national average, and it's putting you definitely in a better position as far as savings go. Percentage of Canadian household that use a budget to manage their finance. So again, A, B, or C. I will give a chance for people to give an answer. So let's see, we got a few different answers on this one. B, 46, yeah. There we go. So 46%, you're right. Now, that's always a tricky one when we talk about, people that work with a budget. Through my experience working with people, a lot of people do have a budget and work with it, but they're not necessarily working with it the right way. So that's something we're going to cover today on how to properly work with that budget. Best way to plan for unexpected expenses. A, buy a lottery ticket every week. B, only have friends who will lend you money, or set money aside for emergency. I think that's an easy one for everyone. A and B certainly sound good, but unfortunately, the best bet is to put money aside every month. So again, it's setting ourselves up for things that may happen along the way. So now we're going to jump into the meat of things. So first, we're going to start with budgeting. So really, when we talk about budgeting, that is the most important part as far as personal finances go. It is your tool, your information to know what is happening with your money. Now, most of us know a lot of this information already, but we're still going to go through it. So currently, 93% of Canadians have a budget, stick to it. So the nice thing about this is it says that if we have a budget and if we work with it, and we get into this habit, for most people, it does work because they continue to work with it. And a budget contains a lot of very valuable information. So when we talk about a budget, it's not very complicated. So we have income and expenses. Those are the two parts of a budget, fairly simple there. When we talk about income, we're only talking about something you are receiving on a regular monthly basis. So either through work, pensions, investments, as long as it's a monthly income. Some people get quarterly incomes from various sources and such. those types of income are not part of your budget because they only come in on occasion. That money is set aside for other things as we kind of go through our budget. So knowing our income, most people are pretty good at knowing that. It's pretty easy, and we know what we make every month. This is just an example, and we will be distributing the book that has all this information as well at the end of the presentation. They're just average incomes for type of employments that are out there. Again, these are national averages for Canada, so it does vary depending on where we live. Then when we look at expenses, again, there's two types of expenses. So we have our fixed expenses, things like mortgages, rent, insurances, loan payments, and such, which most people are very good at. Those tend to be larger amounts. They're the same one pretty much every month, and most people know these top of our head. When we fall into our variable expenses, that's often an area where there's a little bit of discrepancy. So we've got perception of what we think we spend, and then there's reality of what we actually spend. So things like fuel expenses, groceries, potentially utilities and cell phones, and those types of expenses, going out, restaurants. Again, that perception often does not match. So this is where budgeting is really going to help us figuring out what are our average expenses when it comes to those categories. Again, this will be in the book that you will have access to, fixed expenses and variable expenses. Again, national averages for Canadians. These are just guidelines. Everyone's got their own thing when it comes to our expenses, and we spend more in certain areas, maybe less than others. So budgeting is a very personal thing. There's no guideline of here's what works for everyone, because it's your money. You're the one who gets to spend it. You get to make those decisions, basically. So if you've never created a budget before, the first version of a budget you're going to create is what's called the cost of living budget. So cost of living budget really looks at your basic spending necessities for the month. So things like paying down debt, saving goals, and such will come in later. Because first we got to make sure that your cost of living budget works. So we're looking at those first most important expenses. So when it comes to budgeting, the big part is about tracking our spending. So creating a budget saying, here's my income, here's all my expenses as far as I know. I do the variance, income minus expenses, it works or it doesn't. This is our perception for a lot of it because we don't really know. So the work comes into the tracking of the spending. What does reality tell us? And that's where the work is involved. Because unfortunately, I've seen this many, many times in my career where someone says, yes, I have a budget. Here's my income. Here's my expenses based on what I believe. But there's no actual tracking behind it. So that's where sometimes the numbers look good, but it doesn't work because we're missing some really good information. When it comes to tracking our spending, there's a lot of different ways to do it. Keeping receipts, writing things down. Most of us have cell phones. A lot of people use debit card a lot, so we can always go back to our bank account and then see our transaction. The tricky part with that method is although it shows on your bank statement, it shows you what you spent and where, it doesn't necessarily tell you the what. So now you need to remember, okay, it says Walmart, for example. Well, was that grocery? Was it clothes? Was it a bit of both? So we got to be careful with that technique just to make sure that we can allocate our spending to the right areas. And if you've never budgeted before, it takes about 3 months of tracking to start getting a good average. After 3 months, and the more you do it, the better your information gets. And it kind of shows you your cost of living on average, the more you do it. So it's a really great habit to get into. Again, we have tools that can help you with that. Simple Excel spreadsheets, just kind of brings everything together to make the job as easy as possible for you. Irregular expenses, again, this kind of comes after we've done our cost of living budget of additional things based on the budget of what can we add to it and how much can the budget support. So once we have our income, we have our expenses. Again, we do the difference between the two. So net surplus is where we want to be, which means there's extra money left after our basic living expenses are covered. So now we can look at things such as paying down debt, creating some savings, investments, and such. If we're in a deficit situation, then we need to start looking at our budget on how can we make this budget balance. Be it reviewing our expenses, is there additional income opportunity, and things of the sort. There we go. So all this sounds really good, but what does it look like? I know for a lot of people, being visual helps a little bit. So here's a very simple budget example uh, on how to do. So let's say someone working, minimum wage currently here in Ontario, take home pay would be just under 1,800 a month. Let's say this individual is renting a room, grocery needs for the month. They have a car, so we got some fuel expense, car insurance, and some miscellaneous. So miscellaneous can be going out, restaurants. Again, you decide on how much you want to break things down. So this is saying that the cost of living for this individual will be $1,300 a month. So in theory, we should have an extra $472 a month, which is a great place to be in, because then we can look into savings. Maybe they're renting a room so they can buy a home later. So again, here's what our perception is of our monthly costs. Now, when it comes to tracking our expenses, a much better way to do this now is to do our tracking once a week. There's a couple of benefits to doing that. When we do it once a week, it's a lot quicker. So on average, once a week, you're looking at 5 to 10 minutes. If we look at this budget, for example, rent is once a month. So that's usually in the first week of the month. We'll have our insurance, which is once a month. So the only thing left to track right now on a week-to-week basis is groceries, fuel expense, and our miscellaneous. So that's 3 types of spending we need to keep an eye on. So it's all about getting into that habit. It's a little bit like going to the gym. So I always say, Sunday morning over coffee, good time to do our budget. Again, 5 to 10 minutes. So first week wasn't a pay week, no income. Paid rent was paid, got some groceries, fuel expense, insurance wasn't due, and spent some of my miscellaneous. Week 2, and in week 2, you do the same thing. So then you see your expenses for the week. Week 3, same thing. So now as we progress, we can start seeing how things are going. And when a budget is very tight, this becomes important. Now, in this case, we've got room to play with, so I'm not concerned, but it definitely looks like my grocery spending is going to be higher than expected, but my fuel expenses looks a little bit lower, and my miscellaneous looks right on target. So depending on your situation, this can become very, very important. By week 4, all right, I got all my expenses. So in this case, I kind of saw it coming. It looks I spent a little bit more on groceries, but I spent a little bit less on fuel expenses. So all in all, I only overspent by about $5. So not a big deal. There's room in this budget. But when that $5 isn't there, this is where, by doing this on a weekly basis, kind of shows us. And we can move money around. I spent more on groceries, but less on fuel. Again, that's okay. So this is what month 1 told me. That's where month 2 and month 3 will kind of validate this. After 3 months, if we see that, yeah, it's pretty much around $290 every month, so now we can make adjustments to our budget. All right, maybe bump grocery to $300, and if fuel expense stays the same, I can bring that down to about $125, $130. Again, when it comes to expenses, always better to aim high, income, aim low. Avoids nasty surprises. And by doing this kind of tracking, of really seeing what you spend and where, that's where we often make some discoveries, like I said, about perception versus reality. Great example for me is, I'm a Timmy's guy with my morning coffee, and sometimes it used to be at lunch and maybe one after work, which at, $2 to $5 every time doesn't seem like much. But then you start doing this tracking and you realize that I was spending on average $300 a month at Tim Hortons. I could afford it, not a big deal, but to me, it was ridiculous. I didn't want to spend that much money there. So my tracking of my expenses showed me this, and then I was able to make personal decisions. Okay, I'll start making a coffee at home instead. I still treat myself once a day, and I spend on average $80 a month there, but that is something that I'm more comfortable with. So that's really the power of tracking. We all have certain things that we enjoy and that we like, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with those things, but it's making sure that we are spending what we think and that it's not more than what our perception tells us, to make sure that we're comfortable with it, because now we're making an educated decision based on facts of where our money is going. And like I said, if you're okay with it, that works, or you have a surprise and then you're able to make changes based on reality. All right. Any questions on this piece from anyone, or you can use the chat or unmute yourself if you have any questions. All good, all good. All right, perfect. So now we're going to talk about managing our cost of living, just being a smarter consumer. And this is really an area that can give us little tips and tricks on how to save money. So 44% of working Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck, and I honestly think that that percentage is probably low. Because again, a lot of people don't necessarily budget, and again, our perception is, oh no, we're good, but in reality, if we start looking at the numbers, we might have a little bit more of a surprise. So this is unfortunately common for a lot of people. So areas where we can save money, we're going to talk about things like checking our bills, negotiating better plans, little things like packing a lunch, and then looking at larger purchases, especially car purchase. So the first one sounds rather simple, checking our bills, but a lot of people don't really look. They get the bills, see what they owe, and we pay it. Companies make mistakes often. So it is important to look at what exactly you're being billed for, because if there's an error, we need to get it corrected right away. If we wait too long, unfortunately, companies won't correct them at that point. They'll just tell you, well, you should have called 3 months ago. So valuable information, very important to look at our bills, really see what's on there, what we're getting charged for, especially when we get any type of new service. There's always promotions and deals, and all of a sudden, you're being charged something different than what you were told. So very, very important to look at that information. Negotiating better plans. Again, most of us have some sort of service, be it TV, internet, cell phone, landline, you name it, we've got something, even insurances, car, home, and so on. So it's important to look at these bills and review those services, usually at least once a year. One of the reasons for that is our needs change over time. So what I needed a year ago and what I need now might not be the same. So maybe I'm paying for services that I used to need that I don't need anymore, which might give me an opportunity to reduce some of those costs. Other part is when we first sign up for services, just about anywhere in the world, again, to get us, everyone is always offering, promotions and great deals. We often end up with, more services than we wanted because they're offering us such a great deal, and that's kind of the catch. Problem is once that promotion ends, now that bill tends to get a lot more expensive. So again, reviewing these services at least once a year would let you see when those promotions are done. If you call these companies, typically there's always some sort of new promotion they can offer, or again, just doing a review of your services. Do you still need what you need? Maybe you have an international plan right now because of where you are, and it makes sense because you're calling, Canada, US, and things like that. But then once we move back, we don't need that anymore, but we tend to forget. So now you're paying for a service you don't need anymore. So those are the type of examples of things that reviewing your services help us. Same with insurance companies for car and home and so on. Unfortunately, I find that industry isn't as good as it used to be in the sense of them really shopping for their clients for best rates. So doing that review and shopping it around is always a good thing. And as a CAF member with the personnel, again, you get a really great discount when it comes to home auto insurance and such. So always a great opportunity to review those services that might save you a little bit of money. Banking cost, again, depending on where you're banking. As a CAF member, you get no fee banking through Bank of Montreal. There's other places that offer that as well. So places like online banking, same way that a lot of places, a lot of people feel comfortable dealing with traditional banks and are paying annual fees. Again, it's making sure that you pay for what you are actually using. So some people out there still use cash on a daily basis. They maybe go to a bank machine, 2-3 times in a month, take out money. They don't use debit. So if you don't use debit very actively, you probably don't need this, on average $16 a month fee package from most banks that gives you unlimited debit usage. So it's again, you're looking at how you use the product to make sure that you pay for what you actually need. Same way that a lot of banks also offers, if you keep a certain amount in your bank account every month, then they don't charge you fees. So it's really talking to your financial institution, seeing what they offer to make sure that you're getting the best package possible for you. Overdraft charges for a lot of people is a big one. Most banks tell you, okay, it's a $4 to $5 fee. It's a flat fee every month, in case you use your overdraft. Which, if you tend to use the overdraft, every month, okay, so that's probably cheaper. But then the question is, why are you using overdraft every month? Which is, now we should have a conversation to hopefully get you out of that need of that overdraft. Outside of that, you can have a pay as you need option. So it's nice to have an overdraft option just in case of, but if you don't use this every month, now why pay a fee for it every month? So for the few times of the year where you might use it, you pay a pay as you go service, basically, which most banks offer as well, would be a lot cheaper for you. So again, personal finance, that's the word in it, is personal. It's looking at ourselves. What do I need? What works for me? And what are the services that I need? Because it is a very individual thing. Some banking tools: Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, FCAC for short. They're the federal organization that manage basically all the banks here in Canada. Their website is full of really, really useful information of all kinds of sorts, personal, business. They have tools on there for budgeting and tracking and how to pay off loans. So it's a really great resource for a lot of information. You can compare every bank in Canada, see what they charge for fees, what their interest rates are. So great tool that keeps it being updated on a regular basis. So that's always a great resource to have. Another area where a lot of people spend a lot of money, phone costs, especially cell phones, landline versus cell phone. So again, it's looking at the service that you need and want. And especially right now, being out of the country, you probably have more specific needs than if you were living here. So that probably means making some adjustments, getting the right plan for you. A lot of people don't have landlines anymore. Cell phone for many people is the only number that they have. So again, it's making sure that you have the right plan for you. And again, Canada, US, UK, those charges tend to vary quite a bit. Definitely in Canada, cell phone costs tend to be more expensive than a lot of places. But it's just seeing what you cost, making sure that you pay for what you need. Again, companies everywhere are very good at selling us more than what we need. So it's making sure that you're getting, what it is you need, not what they're trying to sell you. Again, here in Canada, bundling used to be very, very popular. I'll fully admit that I'm not sure if that's something that's big in Europe. But the more service you have with company, they would offer you multiple services. The problem with this is 20 years ago, this was a great deal. When it comes to today, it's not as beneficial as it used to be. And what I mean by that is, when we start looking at services like cell phone and internet specifically, there's a lot of what we call third-party companies now that offer these services a lot cheaper than the big providers. So in Canada, again, you'll have Bell and Rogers and those types of companies that are the big supplier. But then you get small companies, you usually are provincially located, that are resellers of those services, and you pay a lot less through them. So I used to be with a large provider for my internet service. They wouldn't even offer unlimited. So for what I wanted, I was paying about $120 a month for internet only. Went through one of those smaller company, and now I get the exact same service from the same provider, just through the smaller company. And now I get unlimited internet, same speed, same everything, for $53 a month. Big difference. So again, in Europe, not sure if there's as much of those opportunities depending on your need, but that's where Google is our friend to look up what is available. And when planning on a return to Canada at some point, again, that's when you're looking to set up some of these things, is thinking of those smaller companies that offer these services. And you often get a lot of better deals, can save you a lot of money. Saving on food, again, another area that we can spend a lot of money on, because eating is expensive. Eating out is definitely more expensive than eating at home. So little things like breakfast at home, bringing a lunch, snack and coffees or areas could definitely save us some money. As I mentioned, my old coffee habit used to be on average $300 a month. Well, okay, I made a change. Now it's 80 to 100. I've now saved $200 a month that I can put on something else. Veg out, meatless meal. Again, that's really about making choices about what we're going to buy. We all have certain things that we enjoy eating, but it comes down to how much are we willing to spend. Reality is vegetables can be just as expensive, depending on time of year and such. So it's looking at some of those things and making those personal decisions. I love me a good steak, absolutely, but there's times it's ridiculous when it comes at the price. All right, so this week I'm not having steak because it's $20 for a nice sirloin or something. But it's making those kinds of decision of what am I willing to spend, and how much of a priority is it to me. Cooking a big dish weekend, weekdays really doesn't matter, especially for single individuals, or if only two of you in the household. I find it more difficult to cook for one or two than for five or six. And a lot of times, now Europe's a little bit different with the markets and such, but again, you often get deals on the family packs. Well, for one or two, the family pack often seems like too much. But when you're cooking, it's just as easy to make a big dish of something, and then you can freeze items, smaller portions for lunches, bigger portions for dinner that you can microwave yourself a homemade lunch, in 5 to 6 minutes. So not only is it a money saver, it's also a time saver, because the default is don't feel like cooking, I'm going to eat out. When we have some ready meals in the freezer, now it gives you a home cooked meal that costs us nothing. Shopping with friends, so looking at discount markets, Costco's of the world, where you get items in bulk. Again, depending on your personal situation, yes, you get a deal, but now you're also getting too much of something. So that's where, if you have friends, relatives in the same type of situation, now you can both get the discount and splitting quantities. So now you don't have too much of something. When it comes to food, we talk about, setting a budget and sticking to it. Well, first we got to discover what is your average spending, make sure that you're comfortable with that number. And then the tracking, unfortunately, doesn't stop. We continue to track then to make sure that we stay on average within that allotted amount that we've decided for ourselves. Bring a list. Well, the list is useful for a lot of things. The list will tell you what you need, make sure you don't forget anything. And if it's not on the list, odds are it's because you don't need it. So now you need to make that decision. If it's not on the list, do I buy it or not? And they said, don't shop hungry. Absolutely. Very, very true. And I can completely admit that for years, I was guilty of this, where, excuse me, I would go shopping hungry, usually on Sunday afternoon, haven't eaten yet. And I would spend a lot more on groceries than, I thought I should need. And I would waste food or buy things I don't need, and realize that it's because, yes, I was shopping hungry. Now, I will also admit that I still do that, but the difference is over time and tracking my spending, I made that correlation and realized that that's what I was doing. So now I make sure to bring a list. And if it's not on the list, now I don't get it because I know it's just because I'm hungry. And by doing this and being more aware of myself and how I do my shopping, I was able to save money on groceries, have less waste, throw less out, because now I'm not buying more than what I need. And my list helps me guide me through that. So when it comes to our spending, a lot of it is about understanding ourselves. Every one of us have certain things that gets us to spend money. So when we're able to start identifying those things that trigger us and get us to spend, now we're able to take control of it. How am I going to change that? And how am I going to be aware? And we're all different. We all have different things. So that's where through budget tracking, you can identify that for yourself to figure out what is your trigger, what are your habits that tend to make you spend. And now you've got the information you need to take control of it. If you find that, okay, I need to change this, okay, how are you going to change it? And again, those are things we can help you with and kind of work with you as far as assisting you with some of these things. Do you need a car? Big one about cars is, especially when you finance a car, This is an area that over my almost 8 years of financial counseling now is an area that a lot of people get themselves into trouble. So you buy a car, especially you finance it, you can't sell that car because that loan has a lien on the vehicle. No one's going to buy a car with a lien on it. So it's the type of purchase that when we do, we're stuck with. And having a really good budget will make this type of purchase a lot safer and a lot easier, because a lot of times, they're really good at making that monthly payment look small and such, but many times it is what throws a budget off for someone. So now you become car poor just paying for that car, and it creates problems elsewhere because we're going to need maintenance. There's probably going to need repairs, and we need tires and so on. So if your budget doesn't have any surplus with that car payment now, plus the fuel expense and insurance cost, if the car breaks down, we can't afford to fix it. So we still need some sort of surplus to be able to manage this. And the other thing to be very, very careful about is about 10, 15 years ago now, every car dealer, sure, will roll in your old loan into the new loan, which, sounds good, but is actually a very bad thing. Now you buy a car, they roll in your old loan, so you owe more on this new vehicle than it's already worth right off the bat. So that becomes very expensive for people. And it's that never-ending car loan. So if you're someone that likes to change car every 2 years, and there's people that, for them, that's a big thing. Again, at that point, leasing might make more sense than buying because it's going to cost you a lot less. So just really being careful, those types of large purchases, really making sure that you have a good, strong, solid budget so you know exactly, income and expenses when you're getting yourself ready to make this kind of purchase. Because like I said, this is an area where I've seen a lot of people, unfortunately, get into trouble when it comes to that. Same with buying a home. We talk about being mortgage poor. Well, again, it's making sure that all the expenses are thought of, because it's easy to forget expenses when we don't budget and track of all our spending. Pet expenses can be a huge one for a lot of people, again, depending on what you buy and what, how you decide to manage that piece. So it's an area that our perception and reality often does not match. So again, looking to purchase a home, big expense, having a good budget will help, and then being ready for that purchase. So on average, when you buy a home, you need to be there for at least 5 years. So if you're into a new posting or it's a short-term posting, for example, now might not be a good time to buy, because if you're moving in 3 years, you could end up losing money on that home purchase. Although in the last 2 years, the housing market has gone crazy. I don't think anyone would lose, but there is that risk of just making sure that typically you're looking at least a 5-year stay to start building equity into that home. So something to just think about. Oops. So can you afford it, be it a car, a house, or just looking to finance any type of larger purchase? Could be even something as simple as a car repair, and you need to put it on your credit card. Figuring out what this means for you financially before you make the transaction is always a good idea. So again, Google is our friend. There's a ton of tools out there available, loan calculator, credit card payoff calculator, line of credit payoff calculator. You just Google that, tons of them will show up. So you can really see what it means. So I have a $3,000 car repair. I don't have the money to pay for it. I'm going to put on my credit card. My budget tells me I can put $150 a month on that credit card. I put this into this tool. Now it's going to show me exactly how long it's going to take for me to pay it off, how much interest I'm going to pay. The benefit of that, again, now is I also have a good budget. I know what I spend and where. Well, it's showing me that this is going to cost me X amount in interest. Well, now I know that, I can cut off my coffee, for my Tim Hortons for the next while. So now I can do $200 a month. How much money is that going to save me? Now I can make that personal decision confidently because I know exactly where my money's going, and I know where I can make some choices to pay this off quicker. So again, using the tools that are available for us, is a great way to do it. And again, it's something that I'm more than happy to help you with. So if you're not sure, you give me a call, we set up an appointment, and I can help you with that. Here's some more concrete examples here of, saving on some of the things we talked about. So saving on food, for example, if someone taking lunch to work 3 times a week, average savings would be about $5 a day because there's still a cost to your lunch, which would save you on average $15 a week, $60 a month, about 720 by the end of the year. So again, that adds up. So now if you do lunch 5 days a week, saves you that much more. Transportation, owning a car, if you got to pay for car parking, if there's public transport. Again, this just gives you an example of how much you could be saving. Again, it depends on your personal scenario. Sometimes, if you live out in the country, there is no public transport, that's not an option, but it's looking at those types of costs. Cell phones, plan, pay as you go. Again, it depends on your need. The big key about cell phone is if you are on a plan, well, technically you should be paying the same thing every month. If you're not, that to me tells me you're not on the right plan, because your plan should cover all of your needs. Now, on occasion here and there might happen that you pay a little extra, that's fine. But if every month you're always paying above and beyond, then we need to look at your plan. Is there something better that would cover your needs? So now that variable expense become a fixed expense? Or can you look at your habits on how you use that cell phone, and can somebody change so you stop paying extra charges? So again, paying more is not always the option. Sometimes simply looking at our own habits and how we do things can help us save money as well. Just to make sure that you find yourself in the right on the right plan, so you know exactly what your needs are. Which leads us very greatly into managing our cost of living, and we're going to talk a little bit about needs and wants. So what is your Latte Factor? We all have a Latte Factor regardless of our income level. So a Latte Factor are those little things in life that we enjoy. So I talked about my Timmy's habit. I've got way more other Latte Factors than that. But again, it's figuring out yours. For some, it's designer coffees, eating out in restaurants. Maybe it's, you're a collector, or some people it's craft and they scrapbooking and making things. And again, it's that perception of how much do we spend on these things? And does it actually hold that much value for us? So again, I gave my Timmy's example. I am also a comic book guy, where for many, many years now, I used to spend a lot of money on comic books and those types of things. But through time, maybe our like for those things change, and then you start spending less on those types of things. So it's again, finding what are those things for you, being able to track that spending to make sure that whatever that is has that value for you, and to make sure that our perception and the reality matches, to know exactly what's going on there. There's absolutely nothing wrong with any of these things, and again, it's your money. You get to make these choices, but it's about making an informed decision, making sure that what you are spending on those things is what you thought, and that you are comfortable with it. And that's really the key: eliminating perception and building things based on reality. First one here, they say, when does a want become a need? Well, this one here is the biggest marketing lie in history. Right? I come from a marketing background, and the first thing you learn in marketing is a need is a need, a want is a want. You cannot turn a want into a need. It's not true. And the reason for that is because over time, as a society, we've modified the meaning of these words. A need, when you look at the true definition of a need, is something you need to survive. That's a need. So you need shelter, you need food, you need some clothing, qualify with some, we need a roof over our head. Those are true needs of life. Everything else is a want. But again, as the word need got modified, so did the word want. Because now when we use the word want and we say, I want something, people almost look at you funny. It's like, oh, you're greedy, you want things. How terrible to want things. But the reality is that's normal. We all have wants. But if we start using these words the way they are actually truly meant to be used and how they are defined, a need is something we need to survive. Everything else is a want, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with wants. Because when we use the word need, psychologically, we justify it to ourselves. If I say I need a new laptop because this one's too slow to play my games, I'm just convincing myself that I need a new laptop. Versus if I say I want a new laptop because this one's a little older and it's too slow to play my games, mentally it changes our attitudes toward, yeah, I want it, but then according to my budget, my personal finance, does it make sense? Can I afford it? Am I going to finance it? How much is it going to cost me? So then all of a sudden I might say, well, yeah, I want it, but now I'm going to set myself a savings goal, and maybe in 8 months from now I can actually buy it instead of paying interest because it makes more sense. So using the need versus want, using those terms properly, actually changes the way we look at purchasing things. And it's just a habit to get into. So when we look at things now and we look at purchases, when you're buying something, instead of just saying, I need it, think about it for a second. Do you need it? Do you want it? If it's a need, it's something you need to survive. Otherwise, it's a want. And again, it's okay to have wants. Everybody have them, but it will change your attitudes toward. And as I was saying earlier, it's a very personal thing. So it's looking at yourself and what are your triggers to buy? So what motivates you to buy things? Is it advertising, friends, styles? Is it, personal collections? So what gets me to spend money? Because when you start identifying those types of things, now again, you are more self-aware about who you are, and now you can start taking control of it. I gave my example that I'm a comic book guy. Absolutely. There is not a single comic book shop in this world where I cannot find something that I want to buy. Now, if I don't want to spend money, I'll still go into that comic shop, but I'll leave my wallet in the car because for me, that's enough to discourage me to buy. So again, it's understanding yourself. If there's certain things you tend to spend more money on and you want to take control of that, it's finding tricks on how to manage that for you. For some people, it means not going into the store at all. For some, it's like I said, just don't bring your wallet, don't bring any money, or bring a certain amount, leaving the credit cards at home. So it's finding what works for you to help you manage your spending. And it's a very individual thing. Does the urge to buy die the next day? So that's when we're talking about, especially impulse buying. So an impulse buy, you're out, you see a pretty sweater, you want to buy it. You didn't go out to buy that sweater, but there it is. Typical justification, it's on sale. Hey, 50% off. Great deal. Reality, though, you still didn't go out to buy the sweater. So you're still spending 50% of something you weren't planning on buying. So when it comes to impulse buy like that, it's a really good idea to give yourself time. If you actually say, okay, I saw this sweater, really like it, you don't buy it now. You go home, you think about it. The next day, if you're willing to go back and buy the sweater because you saw it and it's there, and now you've thought about it, and you go and you buy it, that's not an impulse buy anymore. Because now you've thought about it, you've had the chance to really think and go make the purchase. So it's giving yourself, but 90% of the time, people are not willing to go back to the store to get it. Well, if we're not willing to go back, that means we didn't really want it that bad to start. We just wanted it because we were there. So again, it's that impulse, it's that immediate satisfaction of that purchase. So again, it's understanding yourself, giving yourself that opportunity to think about things. Next one, do your purchases make you happier? So that's the equivalent of the old shopping therapy. And for some people, it is absolutely a challenge where, having a bad day, I'm going to go to my favorite store. I'm just going to browse because it always makes me feel better. Problem is we don't browse, we buy because that's what actually makes us feel better. But for a lot of people, later that day or the next day, now we feel guilty because, oh, I shouldn't have spent that money. But now I feel guilty because I shouldn't have spent that money. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my favorite store and browse again because that always picks me up. And now I'm buying again. And for some people, it is absolutely a challenge. So it's again identifying those types of things for yourself to then be able to take control of it. If you know that that's what you do, so now when you get that feeling, it's okay, no, I'm not going to go browse, or I'm going to go browse, but I won't bring any money and credit cards, so I can't buy anything. And it's kind of training yourself to change your habits. And that takes time. It's not something we can do overnight. But now that you are aware of this, you're able to start taking control of it. What needs are now collecting dust? We all have those. Oh, need it, bought it, never used it. And that's where, again, the power of want versus need comes into play, because if I would have called it a want to start with, maybe I wouldn't have bought it. But in this day and age, we can sell just about anything. So if we have things we haven't used in over a year or just sitting in storage somewhere, why not try to maybe sell it, get some money back from it, clear up some room, and just get rid of these things. So great opportunity there. And the last but not least, it's what can we learn to live without? When it comes to spending, our needs are not choices. Needs are needs, and we need all of those things. Our wants are choices. That's where what is, your priority? What do you want your money to do for you? And what am I willing to give up to get to where I want to be? So if your goal is to buy a car and not have a large payment, maybe you just want to save money and go buy something right out, maybe secondhand, but still, it's going to last you for a while. But you're spending $400 a month on restaurants plus your normal groceries, maybe something's got to give. So then getting that car and saving for it, how important is it to you? And if it's important to you, now maybe you can live without going to the restaurant as much, because now you can save more money and you can afford to buy that car. So these are choices that we all need to make. What is your priority? What do you want your money to do for you? Because it comes down to your choices of how to get there. And we all need to make those choices, unfortunately, but that's where the priority comes in. And that's where, again, the budget comes in of really letting us know where we're spending money. So when it comes to impulse buy, like I said, it's about knowing yourself. For some people, shopping online, the last couple of years of COVID has been really great for some online companies. A lot of people have been shopping a lot online. But again, it's making sure that we spend what we believe. I've worked with members that they specifically track their Amazon purchases because they realize that that's where they spent a lot of their money. So now they can keep track of that to see, so they can manage their budget on trying not to spend as much. Going to stores and browsing websites. If you find that for you, those are triggers that get you to spend even when you don't need something. Now you've identified something. So how are you going to change that? Maybe not go browse stores, not go browse, Amazon and so on, just to see what's there unless you actually need something specific. So again, you need something, you go, you buy it. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's all the suggestions that they give us, and then we end up buying more that we need to take control of. So again, it's all about understanding yourself. Credit can be a way to get us to overspend. So again, maybe working with cash can be a good way to help manage those expenses. If we've got a lot of available credit on our credit cards, some banks can be very generous. So you got $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 available. Do you need that much? Is it a temptation to spend for you? So calling your bank and saying, you know what, give me $2,500 line of credit. That's more than enough that I need for my typical needs is okay to do. You can absolutely do that, especially if you don't need that much. One, it's protecting you in case you ever lose your card and avoids, additional problems. Although you've got protection, just makes it easier. Having large credit available is not necessarily helpful to your credit anyway. So keep it to an amount that protects you from yourself and that meets your needs. Again, if the credit cards are a temptation to buy, leave them at home. Don't bring them with you. So if you need it, you bring it out. And like I said, especially when talking about impulse buying, give yourself a chance to think about it, sleep on it. Go, if you really want it, you'll go back the next day and get it, but it's no longer at that point considered an impulse buy. Now, if you've really thought it through, you really decided that you wanted it, you go and you get it, and that's okay. Now it's a decision that you have made. And all through this, if you're tracking your spending weekly, you will see the impulse buy. So again, as you track it, it'll kind of help you guide you through that. Now, the last point on here, baby steps, absolutely. When it comes to change, human nature, most of us don't like change, and that's okay. That's just the way we're built. So when it comes to our spending habits, it's very similar. We can't change the world in a day. So when it comes to making changes, after you had a chance to do some budget tracking and really tracking your expenses, you might see some areas that you want to work on. Don't try to work on too many things at one time, because we often find it discouraging. We feel like we can't spend our own money, we're restricting ourselves, and that's not the idea. The idea is to get you to an area where you want to be based on your goals. So start with one area, see what kind of change you can make there. Continue your tracking, see the result. Now I'm spending, $75 less a month now in this area. This is working. Where else can I do this? Then look for another area to maybe look to make some changes. The change is new for three to 4 months, and after that, it kind of becomes the new normal. If you try to change too much too quickly, like I said, for a lot of people, they just find it discouraging, and then we give up and we just go back to the way we used to do things. So give yourself time, get used to the change, and don't try to do too much too quickly. It's just a great way to basically help you achieve that success. I'm going to open it up to questions when it comes to budgeting, tracking, tips on saving money. Do we have any questions? You can type them in the box, or you can unmute yourself and ask the question, whichever works for you.